Hey everybody, welcome to Finding Common Battlegrounds. This is our podcast where we have both the left and the right, and we talk about current issues and try to find what we have in common versus as opposed to focusing on what we differ. And so we're always surprised at how much we actually have in common. And we consider this a more of a civilized podcast where minds with just differing opinions get to talk and discuss and we'll see where we can come together on things. So I am Tommy Triplett. I represent the conservative side. Ryan Cragen represents the liberal side, and we have a few topics we're gonna talk about today. We're gonna be starting out with the Fox News and Tucker Carlson getting canned from Fox News, and so we're going to go and get into that. But first, Lux Bidets, they're our sponsor. We are both big fans of bidets. And I was, I love having a bidet. And when I go to the bathroom on where there's no bidet, I like grumble under my breath because I have to wipe with old barbaric toilet paper.
Barbaric. Okay, so not to gross out our listeners, but have you ever been like sick? We'll just say it that way, right? Sick, where stuff is coming out rather fluidly. Isn't that like the best time to have a bidet?
Right.
Oh. So I just had a bad spell this last week, and luckily I was here. Man, the bidet is just soothing, right? It's just so soothing when that happens.
Well, you're clean afterwards.
Yes. No, absolutely. But yeah, the relief of just like, yeah. Anyway, there you go, listeners. Get yourself a Lux bidet. You absolutely need to. We do have a coupon code. We'll mention it at the end of the show. And I do have to point out, Josh used to point this out all the time. You're wearing blue, but you're the conservative. I'm wearing red. I'm the progressive. What is up with us?
So often. Yeah.
At some level we're secretly doing other things, but okay. So yeah, we're just playing roles. This is all fake. Tom's actually the closet liberal and I'm the conservative. All right, let's jump into our first topic. So there are two pieces to what, Fox News has been in the news a lot, right? The first one is their settlement with Dominion voting machines for over $700 million. We'll get to Tucker Carlson here in a minute. So I want to kind of focus on that one first because I do think it's fascinating. Basically, Dominion sued them for libel, right? They said that Dominion's machines had changed the votes, that they had misrepresented the votes. And this was multiple kind of news personalities on Fox News and, of course, many of their guests. And then it came out in Discovery that basically the people at Fox News all knew that it wasn't true, but they were saying it anyway because their listeners or their viewers were all jumping ship to go to even more conservative news outlets. And they weren't feeding the conspiracy theory sufficiently. So they actually knew they were lying and did it anyway. And as a result, they settled. Okay. I think that's a fascinating kind of turn of events. I have lots of questions, but I want to get your take on this initially, and then we'll jump to some of my questions, Tom. What do you think?
What do I think? Well, what do I think about the story? Yeah, they settled. It's hard to say what would have come up out of the whole, if it had gone to court, right? Mm-hmm. And so like what you just revealed, like that they didn't have the case, but they said it anyway. It's news to me, and so I just know it never went to court. So so it's like, okay, obviously they didn't feel like they had a good, strong case because they settled for a lot of money. And I was watching some article today it was something like, it was CNN's that they made last year something like $1 billion. And I don't know if that was, I'm not sure if that was pure profit or what it was, but so mm-hmm. Like, that's almost what the settlement was for Fox. So I was like, was that like basically their entire year's worth of profit that just got wiped out? I don't know. Like, but that, not a small chunk of change.
Not a small chunk of change. So it does sound like maybe you aren't aware of kind of everything that they discovered and all the emails and text messages and stuff once they got to do discovery? Did you catch, like, Rupert Murdoch, basically the owner of Fox News, right? So he's the big owner. He said, yeah, the voting machines, there's nothing wrong with them. I don't know why we're doing this. Tucker Carlson admitted that he didn't think this was true. I mean, it was personality after personality were all basically admitting that they didn't think this was true, but they were worried about the ratings. And that's why they continue to say it on the air. So that's what came out, right? Like, that's been reported multiple times. And this is why Fox News was willing to settle, right? As far as how much that took, I believe they are one of the more profitable cable news companies, right? So I don't think this was like, this wiped out like a full year of profit, but I mean, that's not a small chunk of change. Now, granted, Rupert Murdoch has a lot of money, right? He's a billionaire many times over. So, and I don't think it came out of his pocket, but yeah, they settled for quite a bit of money. So, and we'll get to Tucker Carlson in a minute, because I think that one, it's a different aspect of this, but I think it's fascinating. So now that we know, right, what basically happened because of discovery, right? So Dominion voting machines, they get to dig into the emails and text messages, and that's where they find out that Fox News is basically admitting that none of this is true, but they're going to say it anyway because they're losing viewers to more conservative outlets. My question for you, can we admit at this point that Fox News isn't really a news channel? It's more of a spin channel that doesn't actually care about the truth?
That's funny, because that's what I'm kind of going to go into when we talk about the Tucker Carlson thing. But like, yeah, are they a corporation that's just chasing profits, right? And is more concerned with profits than news? Absolutely.
Okay, so you're admitting that at the end of the day, it's less about telling the truth, it's more about profit.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that profit will win out over news. Now, did they make enough money to covering the story to cover the lawsuit, or was this one that was a losing strategy? I don't know. But like, I'm going to say that about most of the mainstream media, right? So I'm saying, oh yeah, like Fox is there, but everyone else's hands are got just as much blood on them. CNN, MSNBC, etc.
And I know, like, this is regularly your position, right? That like the media is all biased and there are problems everywhere. None of the other media are getting sued by corporations, and that's showing that they're just like lying, right?
Totally right. No, well, that's the funny thing, because I was thinking, like, the COVID misinformation that was spouted by the mainstream media, there's no liable party, right, that could be suing, right, other than maybe the government if they cared. But like, I think the response of how reckless and irresponsible they were with the information that they released. And there was this great quote there's a very great video of Bill Maher talking about the survey of Democrats, saying how many people, based on what they saw, how many people go to the hospital from COVID. And it was something like, it was like 30%. Yeah. And they were like, where it's like less than 2, I think, or something like that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, and it was like, there was clearly fear mongering going on, right? That was just like blowing the COVID way out of proportion, making it look like it was a much more horrible thing. Right. So it's just like, that's just one example, right? Of like, create fear mongering and creating a bigger story than there actually is, right? And creating fear, and like so I think it's the same thing, right? They Fox lashed onto the story, but there was a victim here, right? The Dominion that could sue, whereas there were plenty of victims in COVID, but it's just not any particular group that could organize itself and sue. So that's what I think.
So you don't see a real difference here?
No. Well, no, absolutely not.
So that kind of gets to my second question here, which is, I mean, like, we've straight up caught Fox News lying, right? Like, they know they were lying, that it's open now. Like, we all know they were lying. So my second question is, do you think any Fox News viewers would care? that Fox News was lying to him.
Well, yeah. So let's jump into the Tucker Carlson thing, and I'll just go
Okay,
off.
we can jump to Tucker Carlson because I think it's fascinating, right? That we've caught Fox News just straight up lying. They knew there was nothing wrong with Dominion's voting machines. They knew that. They knew there was nothing to this story, but they lied to their viewers. And I don't think any of their viewers care, right? But let's jump to Tucker Carlson.
Right. Again, it's like, Russian collusion with Trump, right? Or the Steele dossier thing, right? Stories that were completely fabricated and didn't have the sources were totally weak, but and ended up totally being disproven. And yet these other media outlets just ran with these things, right? Just like crazy. It's just like, yeah, they don't care. So Tucker Carlson fired, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've actually watched a lot of or seen a few different opinion pieces on this and read about it, and interesting stuff. So here's my thoughts. So Tucker Carlson someone made a good point. I like that. Glenn Beck was a big talking head at Fox News, got fired. Left, and he's gone on his own. Then Bill O'Reilly fired, went on his own, right? And then now they're like Tucker Carlson, and the point they were making was that Fox News was able to bounce back every time and just not skip a beat and just kept going. But they think that there's kind of basically there was this person that was giving some thoughts that like this is sort of different this time, and it's because there's just more competition out there. There's more Newsmax and other conservative outlets that are competing for Fox. This might be a big deal for Fox. And they said it was 1 million less viewers the day after Tucker's firing the next evening, right? I think he was getting about 3 million a night, and it dropped by 1 million. It was like pretty big deal. We'll see how it plays out. But then I was listening to Russell Brand, who I really like. I don't know if you've heard any of his stuff or
not really.
He's kind of doing what Joe Rogan's doing. He's just kind of doing these podcasts. But anyway, he's basically saying that this is so the other guy was saying that basically cable is sort of on the decline, and your demographics that are subscribing to cable is you're 60 and above, and it's very in our demographics or lower younger demographics, it's pretty low, right? And so it's like it's just sort of phasing out, and that's what they're all saying is that like people are flocking to Joe Rogan, they're flocking to these other groups, these more independent and sort of less what's the
established
word? Formal, established or formal like news outlets. And I totally agree. And like, I think, and like Tucker Carlson, I mean, I don't know what his plans are, but he could go and start his own thing and probably pull a considerable amount of subscribers with him. But the guy was saying that, basically he's like Maddow and Rachel Maddow and like Tucker Carlson are probably the last we're going to see of like these big like personalities, right? That sort of like get a big following on the cable news, and that basically we're going to see just everyone kind of splinter off into doing their own things. And I pretty much agree. And I think these news outlets have just destroyed their credibility. And I think this is what I was talking about with Trump. They were going after Trump at all costs. And I think it cost a lot of the mainstream media their credibility. And then I would say Fox News did it on the other side, right? Where they hurt their credibility defending Trump, right? And it's like, and the election and all this stuff. And it's like I think they died on their sword. Is basically they found this, and this is the hill they decided to die on, and they're not dying on your sword. It's the hill they found a hill that they were willing to die on. This was it. So I think just like I don't think mainstream media will ever be the same. Like it will ever go back to the way it was.
Interesting. So the commentary that I heard on this was actually almost exactly the opposite, which is interesting. But before I get to that,
Yeah, I want to hear.
yeah. So no, I'll get to it. I think it's interesting. I do think it's important to note why Tucker Carlson was fired, right? So he wasn't fired because he was dishonest, right? He wasn't fired because it might have been a confluence of two things, right?
Right.
The discovery did reveal a whole bunch of text messages that he had sent that were very critical of the administration at Fox News, but Fox News is about to get sued by a bunch of women who are working on his program who said that it was a hostile workplace. And that's the same reason why Bill O'Reilly was sued for sexual harassment and why the former director of Fox News, I'm forgetting the guy's name, but he also was forced out because of sexual harassment, right? So Tucker Carlson had created a hostile work environment for women. The current head of Fox News is a woman who said she was going to right the ship and make this actually a safer place for women to work, and clearly that hadn't happened. So I think it was the combination of they were about to get sued for a hostile workplace environment, and he was criticizing everybody and basically thought he was bigger than Fox News. So this leads to the commentary that I heard on this that I thought was really interesting. So if we talk about someone like Glenn Beck or Bill O'Reilly, do we ever hear about them anymore?
Sure. Yeah.
I don't, right?
That's
Whereas I do hear about Tucker Carlson all the time. We'll see if he still stays that prominent, right? But I don't hear about Glenn Beck anymore. I don't hear about Bill O'Reilly anymore. They seem to have just kind of dropped off the radar. And the commentary that I heard on this was Fox News consistently has to make the point that Fox News is bigger than the media personalities who are on Fox News. So Fox News seems to do fine when they get rid of their Glenn Becks and when they get rid of their Bill O'Reillys. Fox News has done fine.
Yeah,
right.
And I guess that's what I was saying. Like the evidence would suggest that they've always bounced back, but
right.
I kind of agree. I think this time might be different. I just think you're seeing such a fractionalization of the viewership, right? In segments that I don't know. Like I haven't yet heard Tucker Carlson's side of the story, right? And he's probably deliberately waiting to give that, and it's like whatever, I don't care, whatever it was. But if he did have a falling out with Rupert Murdoch, or if they thought he was too big or whatever it was, right? But if he very well could go on break on his own. Like he will take a hit, of course, because he doesn't have
a platform.
He doesn't have a platform, but he'll do fine. And he could bring enough viewership that he will do just fine. Because you're probably not conservative enough to get like the feeds, but like Glenn Beck, he's on the Blaze TV or whatever it's called, or Blaze Network, and that's the whole network, and it's got all their programming and stations, and he does like a few, I think, of like either a morning show and a regular show, but so I'll occasionally see his stuff, but his stuff will crop up in my feeds. But yeah, he'll just go on. I mean, obviously, they're always going to take a hit from viewership because they don't have that huge platform, but people like him, people follow him, people listen to him, and that's what I'm saying. Like I think that's just going to continue to happen. Don Lemon fired, right?
He was. Don Lemon was fired again for saying something sexist, right? So maybe this at some level gets to your bigger point. I don't know that I fully agree with your other point, but it seems like that is the Rubicon, right? Like you can lie on cable news. You can just flat out lie and libel a company, right? Say that Dominion voting machines, they were fudging the votes or whatever, and that won't get you pulled off of the air by your editors and by your producers and things like that. But if you create a hostile work environment for women, or you slander women, which is what Don Lemon did, right? So he basically said Nikki Haley was past her prime. Any female politician after like their 20s or 30s, I think is what he said, was out of their prime. And apologized for it, but it was too much, too late, too little, too late, and was fired for that.
Well,
I think that's interesting.
Do you think he was? I mean, he went from the late night to the morning show, and do you think they were just sort of like, oh, let's just let you go, Don, right? Like they were looking for some reason. Seemed like he was already on decline, and they were like, "Oh, you said something we don't like. Okay, just cut the strings here."
Yeah, could be. I do not watch any cable news, right? Like I don't consider it a reliable source of news, right? I'd rather read the newspaper. Well, I'd just rather read the newspaper, right? I'd rather go to more reliable sources, I think, because at the end of the day, what I'm not interested in is cults of personality and media personality worship, right? Which is basically what you get with like a Tucker Carlson,
100%.
Where at the end of the day, people are effectively like worshiping Tucker Carlson. Whatever he says becomes the truth.
Yeah.
I don't care about that, right? Like that's just not the way that I do my news reading. Is I want to read.
Can we agree that's probably not healthy
to just like watch one person consistently? Right. Yeah, absolutely.
One voice.
Yeah. Now I agree.
So that's interesting because I think this is correlated. So I don't know if you saw the announcement. Elon Musk is releasing on Twitter a subscription service so that you can pay on a per article basis to get news. And it's an interesting idea. I've actually always thought that that's something that someone should come up with because that is...
You do realize we've had that idea for like 15 years.
We've had that idea?
Yeah, micropayments. Micropayments have been around forever.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah, like, he didn't invent this. He's just trying to monetize Twitter.
But I don't think anyone has
successfully done it. No,
implemented it with news outlets.
Right.
Because everyone wants their own subscription. I don't want to pay for the New York Times. I don't want to pay for the IBD or whatever it is, and some of these
International
other
Business
Bloomberg.
Daily. Yeah.
And so it's like but there are articles I want to read and I hit the paywall and I'm like, ugh, right. And then I'm like, I gotta decide, and I would love to do, I'll pay, 50 cents, $1 and read this article for sure. And I think that's a great idea. But the point I'm trying to make is because I don't want to dedicate myself to one news agency, right? Or one news outlet, or one basically kind of like one influence. I want to be like, the funny thing is how I legitimize a story, an event that's happening is I like to hear it from different sources, right? That's how I know something's actually authentic. Because I'll hear weird stuff from like one side or the other. I'll be like, what? And then it's like, I got to hear it at a couple other places before I'm like, okay, this is legitimate. Or otherwise I'm like, okay, that was just someone's weird idea. I think that's a pretty, that's common for me. That's how I like hear. I want to hear it from different places. I want to not just listen to one voice. Yeah. I mean, that's not how you get your news, or?
No, I think we're actually in agreement on this. I'm just thinking through the fact that I'm in a privileged position, right? And I know not everybody loves to hear people say this privileged stuff, but at some level I really am, right? So I subscribe to my local paper, and there's a very clear rationale for why I do that. So I actually pay them. It's like $80 a year or something like that, right? And I get complete access to every day's news online. They send me kind of an email every morning, except on the weekends. But every morning I get a kind of a summary of the major stories, and I can just skim through that and read the ones that I want. And then I actually get the paper on Wednesday and Sunday.
I'm sorry, you get the paper?
I do. I get the paper. Like, my next door neighbor, who's who's like 20 years older than I am. He's like, dude, you realize that it's only like people over 70 who get the paper? And I'm like, I get the paper, right? I get the paper.
Kitchen table.
Yes. Well, now out in the Lanai, but yeah, I totally read the paper.
Here, Torin, here's the funnies.
That's exactly why I get the paper. Actually, I get it for the comics, the ads, and then it's almost like the price difference for full access to the online and then getting 2 days a week is like $10 a year, right? And I was like, okay, if this will get my son to read the comics, it's totally worth it to me, because I grew up reading the comics. Did you grow up reading the comics?
Sunday, just on Sunday.
Yeah. So to me, it was absolutely worth it because the comics, to truly get the comics, you have to be fairly educated, right? And well-rounded in your education to be able to understand like everything that's going on in a comic. So I actually want that for my son. Like that's part of it. But there is a rationale for it. Yeah.
A mission. I actually am not that smart because there was like certain comics I never could get. I was like, I don't know. Like was it Bloom County? It was always like half the time I'm like, I don't get it. But
yeah. There are some that I skip.
Stupid stuff.
Yeah. So there are a couple that I skip, but it's because they're stories that go from week to week, and I'm not going to follow them. So the other ones I really like, and there are some that I absolutely love. But anyway, part of my reason for actually subscribing to the local paper, there's pretty compelling evidence these days, and I've read a couple of articles on this, that as local newspapers have declined, people's knowledge about what is going on in the world has also declined. Corruption has gone up, right? And scandals have gone up. So there's just less policing of what's going on. And I don't mean like, police, but I mean news media policing of what's going on by politicians, by local business people. There's just no one paying attention to it because local paper, like in Morgan County, is your paper still around?
I would say that's a correlation, not a causation, right? Or no?
What do you mean?
I would say if I traced all that back, I would say that would be like basically a general lack of apathy, right? Or I mean, increasing apathy in the community, right? Which is why you don't care about the local news and why crime is increasing and corruption, because people are caring.
It could be a common cause, yeah. So you could be saying that like they're both caused by general apathy, but
yeah, that's what I would say.
I think I would go so far as to say I think there's a little bit of a causal relationship there, right? One of the things, and I'm not saying that it's fully causal. I think you're probably right that it's like a common cause, but at the same time, if you don't have news media bringing to light all the dirt that is happening,
right,
that's a problem, right? Like, how are we supposed to know that politicians are corrupt or politicians are doing shady deals or that business people are doing this or, regular Joe Blow is doing that? Like, we kind of need them to do this. And I can give a really good example of this. The city of Tampa, right? I know we're trying to avoid talking about Florida today, right? So we won't talk about the state. Let's just talk about the city of Tampa. The city of Tampa is 300,000 people, right? Proper, the city of Tampa proper. And they have a city council, they have a mayor. I don't go to the city council meetings, right? Now, technically, they make that information public, so they've got their minutes publicly online. I'm not going to go through that. But you know what I do read very carefully? The Tampa Bay Times sends a reporter to every single one of those meetings, and they write up summaries that goes in the newspaper. Yeah. And I read those because I want to pay attention to what's going on in my city. So they're doing a service that I think is extremely important. And then if something strange happens, right, in that city council meeting, sometimes they do a deep dive investigation. And that's how we ended up losing a city council member last year, because he resigned because he was sexually harassing one of his staff assistants. Right? That came to light through newspaper reporting. So I do think that it's actually really important that people fund and subscribe to their local papers. And that's a big reason why I actually do this. I could get all of my news online for free. And this gets back to my privilege thing, right? So I do have enough money that I can pay $80 a year to support my local paper. But through my university, I get a complete subscription to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal through my university. Okay. So my library subscribes to both of those, but because I'm part of the university community, I get unfettered access to the Wall Street Journal and New York Times whenever I want it, which means I could totally read those for free and I don't need to read anything else. But I actually then choose to read the BBC News, which is also free because I want international perspectives. So I'm in a very privileged position where I can get almost all my news basically for free. Periodically, I run into the Washington Post as a paywall. That's a little annoying, though. A little tip to our listeners, in case anybody actually cares. Occasionally, I'll read stuff in the Salt Lake Tribune. They also have a paywall now. I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you're on Firefox as your browser, right? It has a little button built in. It's called toggle reader view. When you hit the paywall, if you click the toggle reader view, it'll show you all the text and the paywall disappears.
Well, okay.
The bigger, better newspapers, right? They are smart enough to know not to let that happen. But the Salt Lake Tribune hasn't realized that,
Not
like,
as sophisticated.
you can click one button, you can go right past the paywall, and you can see the entire article. So
But okay, well, yeah. So I just have a few feeds that I listen that I follow, and the feeds, they're articles from anywhere and everywhere, right?
Is this like Google News, or you going somewhere else? Yeah, Google I used to do Google News, and now I don't anymore because I found BBC and my local paper. And between those, I actually get lots and lots of news coverage. So, but I used to do exactly what you were doing. Huh?
From two sources.
Yes, it is from two sources, but kind of like what you said, right? If something really piques my interest in one of those, then I will start, just going from there to wherever, right? One of the places that I'll often go, if it's like a deeper story that's developing, I'll jump onto Wikipedia and see kind of what Wikipedia has said at that point. And then the stuff that really piques my interest, I'll start following those links and going to the sources on those. So I'm perfectly fine going other places. It's just, I get most of the stuff that I need from those too. If I need to dig deeper, I'll dig deeper.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, what I was saying is I don't go seek it out. I'll just see it in my feed from multiple sources if the story is like big enough, right? Or legit enough. And so anyway, it's fine. Like I think there's value in diversifying my sources to as many sources as possible. That's sort of the view that I'm taking. And I think listen to yourself. You get the freaking paper, for crying out loud. I think you represent an older mindset. That's an older mindset that like I watch this cable news channel and I listen to this paper and that's it, right? And I think people are diversifying more and they're like getting here and here and here and here, right?
Well, okay. So let me lay out kind of all of my news sources. What do you use to actually get your news? Because I use an RSS reader. I don't know if you use an RSS reader as well or no.
I just use the Google on the phone.
Oh, really? No. I'm looking right now to see all the news sources because I use InnoReader. I'm not trying to do a pitch for InnoReader unless they want to sponsor the podcast. InnoReader, hey, sponsor the podcast. But Google used to have a reader, right? So it was an RSS reader that was great, but they just shut it down because this is what Google does, right? So it's like 3/4 of their projects. They're great and lots of people use them, and then they shut them down and kill it. Yes, and then they disappear. So InnoReader popped up, and basically all it does is it aggregates your RSS feeds. And as I'm looking at it now to see like what I actually subscribe to, I have 3 BBC News sections, right? So it's world news, science news, technology. And then I get social science news from a different website that just aggregates like findings in the social sciences. I get 2 comics. So I do have 2 comics that come through here. And then like 4 blogs that I subscribe to as well.
Okay. And then a feeder, then you're getting...
I'm getting tons of stuff.
Yeah. Right.
And then because my research area is religion, I actually subscribe to like 6 different religion feeds as well. One of them is the LDS Newsroom, right? So the LDS Newsroom is coming through. I don't know if you subscribe to the LDS Newsroom. I subscribe to the LDS Newsroom. And I actually just realized one of them I needed to delete because he retired. So I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, geez, I haven't seen anything from him for like because he retired. But yeah, so I would say all told, I probably have about 20 feeds that come into this news aggregator, and that's what I read as much as I can, right? So I try and stay current with it. I was actually reading a bunch today. I had some time over lunch, but so I'd say, I probably get about 20 different feeds that come in. And that doesn't include, that is BBC, but that doesn't include my local paper. So I read my local paper.
So you are diversified.
I would say I'm pretty diversified. Okay. And I think,
my point,
I think we do agree that like cult of personality, right? Worshiping media personalities and just following one person, I think is a really bad idea for anybody.
Yes.
That's part of the reason why I don't do that. I'm just not into following individuals.
But I mean, this is what I'm talking about. Like in the old days, it was like Walter Cronkite, and what he said
was
the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, most people took the whatever he said at face value, and it was, and I think that worked back then, because I think the network did a much better job of actually trying. And there was definitely room for improvement, but that they were trying to kind of get to the truth of the matter, be unbiased and all this. And now it's follow the money, right? It's we say whatever.
But do you really think that like your typical CBS evening news is just straight up follow the money? I mean, I'm not 100% in that camp, right?
Oh yeah.
Nah.
Oh, or omit. Okay, like Pfizer donates to a lot of these news agencies, right?
Oh, they lobbied. We know. Yeah.
Yes.
That just came out. I saw that story too. Pfizer spent a lot of money lobbying the government to make sure that people had to get their shots.
Yes.
I get that. Yeah.
But they sponsor a lot of these news programs. They're a big sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you think that influences the news agency to not be as critical about a vaccine, right? Like 100%. And that's not, you could say, oh, well, they're not following the money, but they're omitting, right? Maybe they're like, we're not going to cover that story. We're not going to look down that pipe, down that hole. 100%. That's like, to me, that is so corrupt, right? They're giving medical advice to us. I mean, and if you've seen the statistics on the efficacy of these vaccines, especially the Pfizer vaccine, right? It's like, it's not what they originally told us, right? It's not as potent as they originally said. And so it's just, that's, to me, I mean, that's as criminal as anything, right? You're basically giving medical advice and telling us you should be doing this thing, and you're like shaming people who don't, and all this, right? I can go on and on about that stuff. It's like, it's horrible. It's like it's just as bad as the Dominion stuff, in my opinion. That's why I put them all in the same camp. I'm like, oh yeah, they're all following the money.
Yeah, we may have to just disagree on this one, right? And why I would say that, right, is I don't think you get the same level of dishonesty across all news outlets. I just don't, right? I think some could care less about truth, that truth doesn't matter to them. Whereas others, I think they're trying, and yeah, there's bias. I'm not going to say there's no bias, right? But I think some are actually really reliable, and it's rare that they get things wrong. Whereas others, I wouldn't trust. I mean, I would not watch OA News or whatever it is for Newsmax. Why would I subject myself to just constant conspiracy theories? I mean, I may as well just watch Alex Jones, right? Like, what's the difference between Newsmax and Alex Jones at the end of the day?
I get notifications from Occupy Democrats or something like that. It's totally
pretty far to the left,
way to the left, right? It's I get the Twitter notifications from them, and it's like they just say, I mean, I should read you a few, and it's just like egregiously left, right? And just like blatantly just omitting any kind of like other narrative. It's like and so you're just like, okay, whatever, but I want to hear it. I want to hear it, right? And I want to hear the weirdness. And like, that's why I think you want to round it out with the crazy and the not crazy, right? I mean, listen to what is it, Sky News and some of those other ones. They're pretty right. You want to hear what everyone's saying. I think you do. You want to hear it from both sides, and that's why, because what I keep saying is, like, there's certain things that always tip you off when the person is very, very like ad hominem attacks and extremely writing bias into their it was like that article we wrote that we were talking about in Wyoming with the with the state thing, right? The person's like, oh,
marrying
Republicans
kids
want
and
to marry kids, right? That was in the title, right? It was like, clearly this guy's got an axe to grind against this, right? And so like I will pull the facts out of it, but it's like, you're already going to be like, okay, this is, this person's, I mean, like, I will already like discount anything that they say because you can tell they've got a bias.
So,
I
but
do that
then
both
why read
ways.
that? Then, like, what's the point? So, and maybe it's just like, I just don't have time, right? Like, I've got so much that I have to read for my work. I'm constantly reading books and articles and things like that, that I just don't have time. So I want to keep up with the news. I want to be informed. I don't want to have to sift through the mountains and mountains of garbage when I can just kind of go pretty close to center, right? I don't think BBC News is radical left or radical right. I know people in the UK who would say it leans to the right. I think a lot of people in the US would say it leans to the left, but pretty much it's like dead center. And my local paper, if you read the editorial page, they are to the left, but they're not radical to the left. They're pretty much straight up. But I don't read the editorials, actually. Like, I don't even read the editorials, right? It's rare that I read the editorials because the editorials is opinion. That's where they say, like, this is the opinion page, right? Pretty much don't read the editorials. I just read the news. That's where I spend my time, is like, well, what happened today, right? What happened today? What's going on around the world? That's it. That's all I need. And then I move on. Yeah.
That's interesting. Because I don't take any article at face value, right? I'm just
like not even just regular news.
I mean, if it's a, there was three deer were euthanized up in Bountiful. I'm like, they've got an agenda.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I'm reading, right? Like, okay, like, there was another shooting, and
everyone's got a bias that they're throwing onto something, right? Everyone does. And it's just like, after you hear it from two or three things, you're like, okay, I think this is really kind of what the general story is. That's what I totally diversify, and I'm not committed or loyal to any news agency, but I think that's I don't know, that's okay. We can disagree here.
I am still going to encourage you to support your local newspaper. I don't know if there's one in Bountiful, Utah, but you should support it. Is there a Bountiful paper?
The Davis County Clipper.
The Davis County Clipper.
Mm-hmm.
You should subscribe to it. They're the ones who are going to find all the corrupt people in Davis County. They're going to do the deep investigative reporting. You need to support that. I'm guessing there's corruption. There's rampant corruption in Davis County, and you're not supporting them finding it.
Probably is.
All right. Did we cover this? I mean, we got totally off. Fox News.
I think so.
Tucker Carlson. We're good?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to introduce the next topic, Tom?
All right. Yeah. All I wanted to do was talk about these leaks. There's a lot of different, so that basically these are the someone leaked some military documents that were sort of an assessment of the war in Ukraine with Russia versus Ukraine, and there was a lot of different things that came out of it. So I just like highlight a few. You can probably fill in a few others, but like Russia was trying to get Egypt to make some bombs for them, and then US was like, actually, we'll pay you more if you don't do that. And US has been spying on Russia, and like that they know quite a bit about Russia, but they're also spying on Ukraine, and they're also spying on South Korea, and they're also spying on Israel, and like making sure that they're going to go the way they want them to go with the war. They also have boots on the ground there, where they have people there that are advising and helping. So does the UK.
Yeah, a bunch of countries have special forces in the Ukraine.
Yeah, they're helping out. Even though it was said that they weren't. What else am I missing?
There was, so a lot of it was about Ukraine and Russia's invasion, but there was actually a lot of other stuff, and I'm not going to remember all the details, but there was stuff about our relationships with a number of different countries, stuff about Taiwan, stuff about North and South Korea. So there was a lot. What we believe at this point, right, because the guy hasn't been tried, is that this was a reservist. He was active duty, right? So he was an active duty, but let me just look him up real quick. His name is Jack Teixeira. It's a Brazilian or Portuguese last name. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah. But he was, in the intelligence wing of the Massachusetts Air National Guard. He's 22 years old, originally leaked this on a Discord server. And then it got passed to another Discord server and another Discord server, and then ended up on Telegram and Twitter and a bunch of social media outlets. One of the documents actually had estimates of how many soldiers had been killed, both by Ukraine and Russia.
That's right.
And one of those documents, it appears, was actually modified to suggest that there were more Ukrainian soldiers who had died than Russian soldiers. But that's not what the original document said. So we actually have the original document too. So it looks like there was there were some attempts by Russian counterintelligence to actually kind of change the documents and then get them out. But it does seem like these leaks may have caused some damage with our allies around the world because, like you said, it reveals some of our assessments about them and some of the stuff that we're doing that's a little bit nefarious. And I was actually wondering, like, why you wanted to talk about this. If it was, do you think it's okay for this information to be out? Do you think it's not okay for this information to be out? Do you think less stuff should be classified? Do you think we should have more information about this kind of stuff? That's what I was wondering. Like, are you going down that path? Because those are interesting questions. Yeah, and I don't know.
What do you think? What do you think about it being leaked?
Okay, so the weird thing is, like, why it was leaked. I don't know how much you've read about this, but like at this point, it kind of seems like he was like bragging that he had access to these documents. It wasn't like he's not a member of some secret cell, right? Of like some terrorist group, and that's what was driving this. It seems like he was a little bit disgruntled. He wasn't very happy. He was a little bit of a loner at times. But he was also like, I have access to this, right? And he was just kind of showing off.
You're not saying he's a whistleblower. He's not like Assange or Snowden, who was like, I have a moral duty to release this.
No, because it does not seem like any of that was driving what he was doing. It genuinely seems like he was using this to gain status in this small Discord server. That he's like, hey, look at this. I have access to these documents. You guys should all like appreciate me. And it was literally a Discord server where they would play like Call of Duty, right? Okay. Bizarro, right? Like I don't fully understand it, but I can see like somebody who's got insecurities in their life. Okay. The follow-up question, of course, is like, is it okay to leak this stuff? Like, I mean, obviously I don't think it's necessarily okay, but should we have more information about these kinds of things? I don't know. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I guess that's the transparency of the government, right? That's what was interesting to me. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about, where I hear article after article after article of like, and then the Ukrainians, like, the Russians are so stupid and they did this dumb thing. We set this trap and killed all these Russians. You know what I'm talking about?
Like, we don't really hear all of the Russian advances where they're doing okay right now, right? They're holding Ukraine. Well, at least that's the news I'm hearing. They're holding.
If they're so stupid and they're running out of so much equipment and they can barely keep it together and they don't have enough ammo and all these stories about the Russians, they're so dumb. I'm like, we probably should be doing better than we are. And we should have made more advances, right? And so like, they didn't add up, like the media's spin on everything and where the current like line of how much territory Russia had was like, oh, that's interesting, and how stalemated everything was. And so that was interesting to finally get someone to be like, yeah, Russia's, Ukraine's not doing that great, right? Russia's like would be, probably considered winning right now.
Yeah, I mean, the line's holding, but yeah, I mean, at some level, you would think Russia would, given Russia's size and their just like the amount of military force that they should be able to muster, they should have walked right over Ukraine. I think that's fair. Obviously, the West, right, has put a lot of resources into Ukraine to help them stem this flow, right? It's another proxy battle. This is basically Vietnam or Korea over again, right? Like we're fighting a proxy battle in Ukraine. And if the West lets Russia take Ukraine, what's to keep them from stopping at Ukraine, right? I think that's the logic, is like, they'll just take another country, right? Next is Belarus, which effectively is part of Ukraine anyway. What's to stop them from going anywhere else? So we're fighting a proxy battle, but I think you're right. Like, obviously Russia's doing better than we thought.
Then we're being told.
Yeah, then we're being told. I think that's fair.
What do you think about the US's involvement in the war? Like, now with these, assuming all these leaks are legitimate.
Yeah, which it sounds like they are, right? Aside from the doctored document by Russian counterintelligence or whoever did that, whoever was sympathetic to Russia, it sounds like most of these documents are perfectly legitimate. One of the stories I heard about this, I'm trying to remember if it was the Journal podcast or if it was the Daily podcast, one of the two, explained part of the reason why this happened. So we're old enough, maybe not all of our listeners are old enough. My students are not old enough for this anymore, but we're old enough to remember September 11th, 2001, right? When there was obviously an attack, people flew planes into the World Trade Centers and the Pentagon and other places. One of the failings that led to that, because there was some intelligence suggesting that an attack was coming, was that there wasn't a lot of communication between our different intelligence agencies. We have more than 10 different intelligence agencies, including the military. And the problem was there wasn't crosstalk, right? They just didn't communicate well.
Their info,
not
sharing.
Right. So after that, they developed this massive, basically, database where they do in fact share that information. And one of the problems is, so it addresses that concern, right? The concern of like, we're not sharing, but now you have a lot more people who have clearance and access to that massive database, including someone like Jack Teixeira, right? So I did think that was a really interesting way to think about this, is like, oh, if we want to address this one issue, we actually increase the odds of people who probably shouldn't have access to this massive amount of data getting access and then potentially leaking it, right? As far as whether we should be more aware of this, I mean,
no,
this comes back
I want to
here.
know what you think about the war, like like you said, you're basically like, this is a proxy war. What's your opinion about that? So we talked a bit about this on a previous podcast. And what the U.S., how deep should the U.S. get into this? And it sounds like they're a little deeper than they've been letting on before.
Yeah. And
are you comfortable with it? Or are you?
Yeah, I am.
And you think this is the right thing, or do you think this is a bad idea?
I mean, what happens if we give Russia Ukraine?
It takes Ukraine.
That's true by definition, Tom. I get that. But what happens next is the real big issue, right? What's to keep them from going after another country?
Sure.
Right.
That's the same argument that we've made in North Korea and Vietnam, right? Same,
absolutely. It's the exact same argument. And with Korea, right, obviously we split a country. I mean, it seems like that might be close to the outcome that we're going to get here. If we just continue with this stalemate approach, right? I did hear that the ruble had lost its value again. So with all the sanctions in place, Russia's economy is starting to feel a little bit of it. I don't know what that's going to mean. I can't predict the future in this. I'm not knowledgeable enough to really say. But I mean, Russia is awful, right? I mean, I think most of us would agree with this. And it's not even the Russian people, right? Clearly, there are a bunch of Russian people who are just cowed into fear. They don't agree with this, but they don't all want to go to jail or get shot. But Putin is a scumbag who should probably be assassinated. But I don't know that would solve the problem, because I think there are a bunch of people, his cronies right at the top, who kind of like what he's doing and they're fine with it. And they want to see themselves as a more powerful country than they actually are right now. How do you stop that? Right? I don't want more dictators around the world. I don't necessarily think the solution is to go in and try and depose dictators, but keeping dictators from actually spreading into other countries and taking them over. It's a defensive war. We didn't start this. I don't think we started this. I don't think anybody can blame the US for this. But I'm perfectly fine defending democratic countries. I mean, I think I would be fine if that's our position, right? That if the US stopped invading countries and instead just defended democratic countries, I'd be okay with that. What's your take?
I don't think we should. I think there was a lot of other ways we could have gotten involved in the war, and I think we picked some of the worst ways. But
Explain.
I think it's going to hurt us very badly.
How so?
Honestly, the funny thing is, I think beyond the military action, I think the economic sanctions that we put on Russia are going to hurt us much more than anything else. How are
they going to hurt us? Just the oil?
It's the first time. So think about it. We've gone on an entire Cold War and never weaponized the dollar. And then we did. We weaponized it and completely just isolated Russia. And the problem is I don't think the dollar is incredibly strong. And we're the biggest, we're a fiat currency, right? We're not gold backed or anything like that. And so it's our biggest highlight of the US dollar is dead, right? And so whereas Russia has a commodity backed, it's basically commodity driven economy, and that's that they've been trying to tie their currency to commodities, to oil, basically. I think this is gonna be interesting. I think it's gonna really hurt us. I've already talked about before. I think we are going to lose. The dollar is going to lose its status as the reserve world currency, and I think this was one of the steps to fast track it that way. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But I think Russia is what's the word? I think they're these guys. They're the jerk bully, but you're not gonna. I'm trying to think of a good example, but they're not going away. They're just there, right? You're not gonna get rid of them. And so I think so. In my opinion, I think if we had let Russia do what they would with Ukraine, and I think we could have supported, but in a much more independent fashion, then I think that actually would have spelt more trouble for Russia than what we're doing now. I think it makes us look really bad as a global bully. But that's my opinion.
Okay, so hypothetical. Russia takes over Ukraine. What are the consequences for the world economy, for Europe, for the European Union, for the US? If we had done nothing, if we were just sucks to be you, Ukraine.
Yeah, I think if the U.S. hadn't done all the done sanctions, but not done what they did, it's just the usual sanctions that they would have been expecting, not taking them off the SWIFT currency system and taking and seizing every asset of imaginable, then it I think it would have made Russia look like the bad guy. And I think everyone's like, oh, he is the bad guy. I don't know. I don't think that's a shared worldview. I think a lot of people don't like the United States. If you go outside, right? And it's Saudi Arabia has we have a questionable relation with them, right? And it's India's like, no, we're going to buy their oil, Russia's oil. We don't want to cut off our what is it? Our nose to spite our face. They're like,
Yeah.
And so it's our I think we're straining our allies to an extent, and it's I think everything would have gone on as usual, but I don't think that Russia would have taken Ukraine if the US hadn't have stepped in. I think Ukraine would have, I think the war would still be going, but Ukraine would be fighting it on their own terms. So that's what I feel like. But
yeah, I'd be surprised if Ukraine had been able to hold out. My sense is, yeah, sure. Certainly we've given a lot of weapons. I mean, that's true, right? And even if it was just ammunition, but we've given a lot of weapons. More importantly, we've given intelligence. Our spy satellites, our drones. I think that has been absolutely instrumental in helping Ukraine survive. Yes, we have boots on the ground now, but they're special forces who, as far as we know, are not actually fighting. They're basically protecting, like, and delivering stuff and training, right? So, if they started fighting, that's effectively NATO intervention in the war. That's a bigger issue. But
right.
I think if we hadn't, yeah,
a gray line there.
I think you're right. I think there's a gray line, right? We've basically said we're not putting soldiers into Ukraine, but that's not true. We have put soldiers into Ukraine, but so have other countries.
Okay, all right, here's the gun. Point it over here, and then adjust that dial. Okay, now here's the button. Now hit that. Just push that button. There you go. Good. We didn't do anything.
I did not pull the button. I did not pull the trigger.
Button.
I didn't push the button. I didn't pull the trigger. Right. Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, I get that it's it's a gray line. I'm not going to debate that. I think that's absolutely true. I can't get behind a world that's just filled with dictators, and it seems like there are so many countries that are headed in that direction. Turkey is going that way. India is going that way. China, I mean, it was already communist, but
pretty much that.
Xi Jinping, Xi Jinping is kind of aggregating even more power to basically make it so he can stay dictator for life, right? Like, increasingly countries are going that way, and it's really, really disturbing. I mean, I was just hearing a story about, because India just overtook China as the most populous country on the planet, right? So that just happened in April. They were talking about Narendra Modi, and he's basically locking up his political opposition, right? Israel is doing this right now. So, like, country after country, we see the rise of autocrats. And that's really terrifying to somebody who strongly values freedom of speech and values democracy. It seems like a lot of countries are going the wrong way. And I'm not sure what to make of that. I'm wondering, I genuinely am wondering why so many countries are headed towards autocracy versus democracy. And I don't know if you have an answer for that, but I don't. It's terrifying.
I would say that balance, it's a pendulum, right? And it swings back and forth. And so, like, yeah, it is what it is. What I think is the point I'm trying to create is, like, you can do more in the name for good. You can do more damage than good, right? Than letting the consequences of a bad action play out. It's the sort of, like, two wrongs don't make a right. And so I'm not the US, whatever. I think there was a role for them with the Pax Americana policy, right? And them being all over the world. But I think that day's over. And I think, like, we're stepping into a new deglobalization era. And I think the US's role is, we're not going to fight everywhere and anyone and all this stuff. And we need to work with our allies and let these regions do what they're going to do, for good or for bad.
I don't know that that's going to happen. We've got too many interests around the world, and
I guess what I'm saying is we're not the shining light on the hill anymore, in my opinion, and we don't have the moral authority, right? I don't think.
But who is the shining light on the hill then? If it's not us?
Well, who is the shining light in the? There
That's
is
what I'm
no shining
asking.
light in the hill. What?
Well, I mean, isn't that sad, right? Like at some level, it's kind of sad that for a long time, people looked up to the US as yes, the world's policeman, a little bit of a bully, right? But we kind of were like trying to keep the peace unless it didn't suit the interests of our corporations. But now, who does this, right? And do we want it to be China? Because it seems like that's what China's plans are. I mean, that's certainly what I'm getting in the media. And I know, media is telling a story because they want to tell a story. But if what I'm hearing in the media is true, China is spreading throughout Central, South America, Africa, Southeast Asia. They're all over the world trying to spread their influence by giving out loans, the Belt and Road Initiative, right? Like they're trying to replace the US as the world superpower. They're absolutely doing that. They have every intention of doing that. And
I doubt they'll do that.
Do we really want a communist dictatorship to be the world superpower that is, Pax China? Is that where we're headed?
We're not going to save anyone from being anything. That's the thing. Well, I'm just saying, like, we're not in a position anymore where we're not saving anyone. We need to save ourselves, but we're not in a great place, I think, as a country, like morally and even and financially, I would say, to like be running.
You're just saying that because we have $32 trillion in debt
that everyone knows we're never going to pay back, right?
I have no idea what we're going to do with that. That is a disaster. It's a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah. Speaking of disaster waiting to happen, I don't know if you saw the news that Yellen, secretary, the treasurer, was like, okay, we have till June 1st. It was like, there's a good chance we could default by June 1st if we don't pass a budget. And that would be a big deal.
A debt limit increase, right? Which means we've got 30 days for Republicans and Democrats to come to common ground on this.
We're just basically, she's just paying the bills based on money that's coming in. It's just kind of a juggling game right now, right? Where the balance is going in and out depending on what's come in and what's not. And so it's like she's just estimating, right? And it's like she's like, I'm getting nervous. I mean, and we don't even have anything on the table. It's like, I mean,
well, we do. Republicans just passed something in the House, but it was dead on arrival in the Senate. It's not going anywhere. So
I don't think it's going anywhere. It's more a statement than anything. Right? And that's like, I don't think anyone understands, like, if the US defaulted, like, we would be able to pay it back immediately, but what it would do to our bond ratings for treasuries, right?
Cataclysmic, right?
Yes.
I got, you saying like, the US reserve currency problematic with Russia. No, this would do it, right?
Yeah.
This would be a major step down the road to other countries going like, oh, well, this is not a reliable currency. Time to switch to the euro, or time to switch to the British pound or something.
Or the Bitcoin or something.
Yeah, anything, right? I mean, that would be a cataclysmic
issue. And the fact that we're even like
debating it.
Yes, that we're even like, well, I'm not budging. You're like, oh my goodness, right? We are so stupid.
We are. I agree. I'm of the opinion, this is probably for a different podcast. I need to go to bed, but I'm of the opinion that our federal government needs to pass legislation that makes it so we have a balanced budget. We should not have any debt. We should just not have any debt. And if we can't pay it, then we can't pay it. And that sucks, right? Raise taxes, do whatever you have to do, but pay the bills.
Will we?
No, because we love to kick the can down the road. I mean, that's exactly what's happening is you and I have been screwed by this. Our kids are totally screwed by this because we've got basically the baby boomer generation is like, we'll live large. We've got this. We're fine, right? We don't have to pay any of this back.
The inevitable conclusion is that we can try austerity for a little bit, but everyone's going to freak out. And the only conclusion is hyperinflation. That's where we're going to go. That's where we just print and we will hyperinflate our currency away. It is basically inevitable that will happen. So that's the way it is. And then, that's just, which, yeah. And then there's a certain point where people will go, well, your dollar's crap, right? It might be really quickly, right? You might be a default, and then the dollar just like just gets
plummets. Yeah,
plummets. And then people are like, oh, we got it. But I think it'll be like this, and then gradually over time until it's like, okay, we got to find something else, and there'll be some competition, right? Is it the won? Is it the ruble? Is it the BRICS nation currency that they've been working on? Or is it this? And then there'll be a winner takes all, right? So who knows? But interesting, or new world currency, something
Bitcoin,
a global currency.
Tell me when to buy my Bitcoin, Tom. Come on, it's got to be the solution. Bitcoin.
I wish it was. It's hard to say. I think it's got a place on the kind of the form of things, but countries don't like currency is power, right? It's your country's power, and the country's not going to give that up very easily. So yeah, I'm not sure how that'll play out. Yeah, like say catastrophic that happens, right? We default. Dollar goes crazy, Bitcoin would explode. It would explode. And but the US government wouldn't be okay with that. And so they'd be like, there would be some retribution, right? Where they try to reclaim some of that power. Like what that would look like, I don't know, right? Ban Bitcoin, or I don't know. So anyway.
The advantage of Bitcoin is you can't really ban it, right? I mean,
right.
It's a distributed currency.
You can't ban it. Yes, that is the beauty of its decentralization, but it would be they can make it harder, right?
Sure.
I don't know. Like, is it resilient enough to stand through that? I don't know. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to get really interesting in the next few years, but we'll see.
It could be really interesting in the next month.
Yes, it could.
Could be really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anything you wanted to add?
No, that's it.
All right. It was fun. Lots came out of that conversation of just like, sorry, I'm trying to get my camera to focus back on me. But those two topics, right? Hi. Fox News and Jack Teixeira, right? Leaking documents led to big long conversation about media and big long conversation about Russia and what's happening. But I don't know. You're right. Could be really scary times in the next just couple of months. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Tom, look, we don't always agree when it comes to politics. But if there's one thing that we do agree on, it's that there's only one way to clean up after going to the bathroom, and that's with a Lux bidet.
Listen, I've been using bidets forever, all right? And Lux is the best, all right? So, I mean, I've got like the little squatty potty thing and the bidet. It's like a whole experience. It's probably one of the highlights of the entire day. But like, it gets me clean and it gets me ready to talk politics in a civilized manner.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. Every time that I use a toilet, it doesn't have a bidet. When I go to a friend's house, I just don't use their toilet, first of all. But that's about as uncivilized as it gets. So civil conversations demand civil hygiene practices.
That's why everyone should get a bidet.
And just to be clear, right, we want to make it clear, listeners can get their own Lux bidet with 10% off by ordering at luxbidet.com and using our promo code FCBG10, Finding Common Battlegrounds 10. And the last thing that we want to say, Lux is supporting this podcast, but they don't support one side or the other. They support civil conversations and clean butts.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Finding Common Battlegrounds. The music is by Ben Sound. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not those of their employers. For more information or more episodes, you can find us at findingcommonbattlegrounds.com.